folks! It is I, Tempest Naraban Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue my discussion on the Forgotten CCGs of old. Collectible card games that have fallen by the wayside, whether no longer published, they failed, no longer supported by the company or the public. Lots of reasons that these have fallen away. Some of these card games still have a little bit support from the public or the publishers. Many of them, gone forever. So today for you I have On the Edge, a collectible card game put out in 1994 in the wake of Magic the Gathering. Its settings and characters were based upon the Over the Edge RPG. So the main setting of everything here is an island in the southern Mediterranean called Amarja. Upon this island, various factions are vying for control of the island, and that's where the game takes place, taking on these various factions, vying for control. Now, it was for 2 to 5 players, and would take about 45 minutes to play. Atlas Games was the main publisher of this, but Atlas Games encountered some problems during the initial attempts to publish this game. It required them to take on a few partners and create a sort of separate publishing company in order to technically put it out. Triton Inc., which ended up being the true publisher, though its name isn't really appearing anywhere. Now, 4 series were put out in the course of this game's lifespan, along with 1 print guide. The original set, the core set, was released in 1994. It included both starter decks and booster packs. The starter decks were 60 randomized cards. The booster packs were 10 randomized cards in a foil pack. When it came to displays, you would find displays of 10 starter packs and boxes of 60 booster boxes for your displays. The first version of this, the limited version, was released in October of 1994. It had 269 cards, and the names of all the cards were in a gold coloring. This is actually the mid-rarity of all the core series that came out. All versions of the core series. Now, a little later came out the unlimited version of the core set. This was the second release and also had 269 cards. Now, the difference here is rather than having gold as the colors for the names, it had yellow. That's the big difference that you're going to find here. This is actually the most common of all the core sets you're going to find. It had the least amount of rarity. And it's noticeably that all the booster packs have the words unlimited written on them. So rather than just the normal booster packs, it just says unlimited now. Now, the last of the core set versions that were put out was the standard version, which came out in 95. February of 95 to be exact. This had 270 cards to it. Now, it is important to note that it still had yellow for the names, but this had a 270th card to the set, the Resounding Bell. The other main difference that you can use to tell between the unlimited and the standard sets is copyright. It says copyright 1995 on the standard set, so you can notice that there's a difference between them. This is the one that's actually the rarest out of all 3 of these, the hardest to find. Standard had the smallest amount of print. If you see standard on the boosters, in the starters or booster packs, then you know it's a standard one. Now, this game had 3 expansions. Let's talk about each of those. The Cut Up Project was the first expansion released, and it was released in 95 with 90 cards in this expansion. They were only sold in booster packs of 10, and of course these were in booster boxes of 60 packs. Now, this added another level of strangeness to the game with talking dogs, diabolical beverages, and creatures that fell from the sky. That sounds weird, but it's a level of weirdness that this game already had. The way to know that it was from the expansion is the card numbers on the set was preceded by a C for Cut Up Project. Now, the second of the expansions was Shadows, and this was a 117 card expansion that focused on minions and servants, dark conspirators upon the island. Once again, sold in 10 card booster packs, 60 cards to a booster box. This time, the number on the card was preceded by a D, standing for dark conspirators. The last of the 3 expansions was Arcana, which focused on the strange energies of the island with magic and psionics. This expansion added another 153 cards. Once again, of course, we had 10 card booster packs, 60 card booster boxes. The card numbers here are preceded by the letter A. Now, there was one print product that was put out and associated with it, Surviving the Edge. This was a 287-page book with tips, tricks, strategies, information about various cards that you could look into. The only thing of note here is this book did not include information about any of the cards from the Arcana set, but the core set and the 2 other expansions were included in here. The last product that was ever released to this was the Burger Box. It was an introductory set that was filled with starters and boosters from the various expansions to get you into the game. It had a random assortment of 6 starter decks, 12 boosters from the core set, and then 12 boosters from each of the 3 expansions, for a total of 48 boosters, the 6 starters, a lot of material in here. This was the final sort of product release, this amalgamation of all the sets. And it was released in 1996, at the end of the game. It was the last product in the line. Now let's talk about the different types of cards you'd find in this set. There were in fact 7 different types of cards. First off were your characters. Your characters were what you were going to use to attack, defend, and eventually win. Your characters were laid out in 3 different rows. The foremost row is basically your attacking and defending row, though there are some exceptions that you're going to have between the first couple of rows. You could have a card that doesn't need to be in the front to attack. Traditionally, your last row is going to be your pool generating characters. Pool is a resource that you can use both to pay for other cards and to gain influence, which you need influence to win the game. So that last row is both your way of winning the game and getting more resources to play more cards. Now, there were also resource cards in general. These resource cards generated pool. This pool was an exception, different from the pool you generate from creatures, as it could be used to play any card that you put into play, but you couldn't use the pool generated by resource cards to, of course, gain influence. You needed your pool generating characters to be in play to do that. Whammy cards were cards that you could play at any time. Gear cards were cards that you would attach to your characters. You'd give to your characters to give them some kind of enhancement. Conditions were special cards that you would apply to a character in play that would have a positive or negative effect. So you'd want to give a condition that gives a positive effect to your own characters, while a condition with a negative effect to your opponent's characters. Environments basically gave an effect to the entire game. Secret cards were special cards with various special kind of abilities connected to certain secret conspirators. The basic strategy is you put your big attackers in your front row, your big defenders in your second row, and your pool generators in your third row. You keep going until you gain enough influence, the amount that wins the game, predetermined amount. A very simple concept that you're playing these cards to, well, build. It is important to note here that the art on the card is incredibly unique. And there's a lot of debate amongst people. Either people love its unique nature, or they hate it with every degree of their body. So you can either go one of 2 ways when it comes to these cards. I would check them out for yourself and see how you feel about them. Now, to finish out today, I do want to talk a little bit about your deck building as part of this. So it's very important to note that your minimum deck size is 40 here that you're going to build. But you draw 11 cards at the beginning of the game. So if you're playing a 40-card deck, that's a quarter of your deck. You can build a strategy quite quickly and efficiently with this. So in this case, with this game, smaller decks are better. You want to look to having a small 40-card deck with certain cards that you're going to want. Now, you're going to want to balance things out correctly. You could very easily kind of get about aim for 5 different types of groupings in your cards and do 8 of each of these, but that's not going to be an advantage. You're going to want about 8 pool generating characters, and then the same amount of combination between hitters and blockers, basically attackers and defenders, equivalent to that. You, of course, are going to want to have about enough resources equivalent to the amount of pool generators you have to start you out. And then between the rest of the cards you have, now that you've gotten about, let's say, 3/5 of your deck, you're going to want to split between the other various types of cards to build out the rest of your deck. It's important to note when we're talking about resources, any card with a 0 cost counts as that, because a lot of secrets and certain other cards cost you 0. Count them with resources, because you can just play those. Now, I've pretty much finished talking about how you're going to build your deck. It is important. The last thing I want to note here about this deck building is take a look at your cards. Certain cards work together better. They gel together better. So you're going to want to make sure all the cards that you're putting together in this deck combo together well. That they don't have friction with each other. So choose wisely on your, well, small selection of cards and build something efficiently. Because that's it for today. I introduced you to On the Edge, a CCG with an interesting way of looking at things. 3 rows of creatures building influence to win the game. Very interesting sort of combination of cards here to talk about. Now, it's important to note I have not gone over the rules of the game, and that's where we're going to dive into next time. We're going to continue with On the Edge and talk about the rules of it. Because this is one of the bigger games, you know? We haven't reached the level of certain things like Vampire the Eternal Struggle or Spellfire. But it's big enough that we'll keep talking about it. Anyway, I hope you're having a good day. If you've played On the Edge before, and you've enjoyed it, or you know some things about it, let me know in the comments below. Or if you've even played the Over the Edge RPG, let me know about that. I haven't really heard a lot about that one. Just let me know those stories in the comments below. Regardless, though, until the next time, I bid you farewell.